Okay, start, please.
Okay, this is, thanks to all the participants. This is the last web dialogue number 4 toward the common understanding of a sustainable food system conceptual framework for the Mediterranean region. This topic this time is dedicated to strengthening the science on challenges and drivers. What this means is to give more result to science. Because in the past web dialogue came that we need anyway, data, impact, assessment, and it's not just about, to promote the activity, because the platform on which 3 different organizations, FAO, CIAM, and Union for the Mediterranean, are collaborating together is a contribution to accelerate the 2030 agenda and SDGs in the Mediterranean region. This means that we have also to understand what means the contribution to the sustainable food system, and I would like in the Mediterranean region, I would like to give the floor to the chair of today, that is Jamie Morrison, that is the director of the strategic program on sustainable food system at the FAO. Jamie, the floor is yours.
Great, thanks Sandro, and good afternoon to everybody. I'll just start by saying a few words, as really to try to motivate the discussion by looking at why we need to focus on science, the challenges that we will face in terms of using that science in the context of food system transformation, and then what is needed, and hopefully that will link to the roles that the platform could take. I've only got, it's not a keynote presentation or anything, it's just a few words by way of introduction. So firstly, why do we need this? And this is really refreshing, picking up on what Sandro said about the fact that food system transformation is seen now as one of the key entry points for accelerated action towards the Sustainable Development Goals under the 2030 Agenda. In September, under the SG's Secretary General's authority, the Global Sustainable Development Report was launched, which identifies food systems as one of only 6 for the transformation of food systems. And this thinking is reflected now in the fact that the UN Food System Summit, which will take place in 2021, and where we hope for the last time that there will finally be an announcement either at the end of this week, so very shortly, or very early next week by the Secretary General, which will set out the location, the governance structure, the special envoy, etc., and allow us to get started. One of the points he's making, though, is that this will be directly connected to the decade of action on SDGs, which is the focus of the Secretary General. This 10 years until 2030. And the Food System Summit will be the first big event within that. So whatever we do, I think, within the context of the Mediterranean platform, it would be helpful to think through how what we're doing links to that process over the next 2 years. So I think the case for having a platform for looking at food system transformation is very strong. But it's just talking to preaching to the converted, but as you all know, food system transformation is inherently complex, and it's not going to be easy. Even if we talk about the rationale for a food system approach, how do we actually go about it? We all know that it requires an integrated approach, but...
Sorry, there's a problem with that.
So I'm going to keep talking, but we're going to try to get the video starting at the same time, so please bear with us on that. So in terms of the complexity, we recognise that an integrated approach is needed to avoid what we've seen in the past, sort of narrow technical fixes of certain constraints throughout the food system, to take a much more holistic approach which recognises the trade-offs which countries are facing in achieving multiple different objectives, the fact that it's important to identify critical constraints, not just constraints, so which ones we need to act on first. But at the same time, I think in most of the contexts we're working in, we see a very limited understanding not only of the performance of food systems, but also of the trade-offs which are faced between the different objectives which are trying to be achieved through food system interventions. So on the one stand, we have that very limited understanding, and I'm speaking not just amongst policymakers, but among CEOs, civil society, etc., which needs to be built, and that can only really be built through strengthening the science. At the same time, even if we have the science, we need to ensure that it's usable. And we face a context of, again, in most countries, a very fragmented decision-making process when it comes to food system development. Narrow ministerial mandates, which tend to constrain coordination across sectors. And we need to take that into account when we're thinking about how to make the science more digestible and useful across these different setups within country. So in terms of what's needed and how this platform may fit, I mean, our thinking, again, in relation to the Food System Summit process, is that we need to work around four sort of key dimensions. Firstly, reaffirming or advocating for the centrality of food systems in the Sustainable Development Goals. And this needs to be not just with government or government workers or policymakers, but across the spectrum. And in doing so, we need to promote a common understanding of what we mean by food system transformation. Not just defining what a food system might look like, but what we mean. So where are we now? Obviously, we need a diagnostic of where we are, the performance of the current food system, but we also need to understand where we want to get to. And that, you know, we all come from different disciplinary angles and would like to see our own particular discipline prioritized and optimized, as it were. But the reality is that different countries have different objectives, and while some may be prioritizing nutrition, others may be prioritizing agro-industrialization or youth employment. And so that sort of balance, that dialogue has to take place in countries, just purely to identify where we need to be. And then if we can identify where we need to be, how do we actually get there? Recognizing that to get from the current status quo to that sort of optimal position that we want to be in, there will be an infinite number of pathways to get there. Some whereby you could imagine a society which is able to dictate through constraining the choice of food system actors in a way that quite quickly takes you to a more sustainable, potentially more sustainable stages. In other contexts or countries which may be weaker institutionally or less able to dictate what their citizens do in terms of consumption or production, would find it more difficult to sort of get onto that particular pathway more rapidly. So it's more through education, incentives, etc., etc. So just understanding how we get from where we are to where we might want to be is an extremely complex issue, which at the moment tends to be quite uninformed by evidence and science. So again, how do we build that into the process? So related, that a second sort of area of work is developing strengthened tools to assist decision makers. Kakoli was just sharing a new document on indicators of food system performance. So how can we measure performance? How can we do the diagnostic? How can we think through the trade-offs? FAO at the moment, for those of you outside the room, under our ES department, are developing a general equilibrium approach to help think through the trade-offs that will be faced and the impacts of different interventions on different dimensions of sustainability. So these sort of strengthened tools, I think, will be quite useful in helping decision makers. Another area that we need to think through is the science policy interface. You can have the best science in the world, but how do we make that into something tangible which is going to
No, thanks, Jamie. It's perfect. I think that just to connect strongly with this science-based approach that we are doing, there is Barbara Burlingame, that Barbara is also another former colleague from FAO, that really is scholarly oriented to show how the gap, in some way, of knowledge, to bring knowledge into the ground. And I would like to give the floor to Barbara Burlingame, that is the chair of the IUNS Task Force on Sustainable Diet.
Thank you. Sandro? Hello, Sandro?
Yeah?
Yeah, could you put the video from the FAO room? Because we don't see you.
Yeah, we have a technical problem. Sorry, Denis. We are trying to resolve the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Sandro. The reason I'm here is because I chaired session 16 at the Palermo conference on sustainable diets, linking nutrition and food systems. And I'm pleased to be speaking at this follow-up meeting, particularly because the theme is strengthening science for the challenges and the drivers. So when it comes to both nutrition and food systems, there is a lot of dogma that is not science-based. And when you combine nutrition and food systems, which is the essence of sustainable diets, this is also true. Sustainable diets is a concept that explicitly links nutrition and food systems with the goal of sustainably eliminating malnutrition in all its forms and simultaneously ensuring environmental sustainability and ecosystem health. This concept has existed since pre-Roman times, but as a science and an academic subject, it was first introduced in the late 1800s at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and it was a program called Human Ecology, and basically it was sustainable diets. There was little interest then, subsequently, during the industrial age, and the chemical industries dominated both nutrition and food systems, the Green Revolution, FAO's role in promoting food security with the metric of dietary energy supply. And so the nutrition part of food systems was missing, and food systems was an industrial process focusing on dietary energy and little else. It was not a nutrition-driven process. Then the first explicit occurrence of the term sustainable diets was in the 1980s in a paper in the Journal of Nutrition Education. It was not that it wasn't well received, but it was basically ignored. And then it next came up as a theme of the IUNS conference, the International Union of Nutritional Sciences, in 1993. And then it came up again as the basis for something called the new nutrition science in about 2005. And in every case, it was suppressed. The concept of a sustainable diet in favor of the concept of a healthy diet. Now, the definition of a healthy diet has nothing to do with food systems. It has no connection necessarily to agriculture per se or an ecosystem. A healthy diet is easily synthesized in a food lab, and if you walk through a supermarket, you see the products of a healthy diet lining the shelves of these supermarkets with labels and healthy heart ticks and nutrition facts shown on a panel. But there's no connection between this so-called healthy diet where you're looking at protein, carbohydrate, fat, and a subset of bioactive beneficial components like vitamins and minerals. Frankly, the food industry much prefers the term healthy diet to sustainable diet because it facilitates their preparation, their processing of agricultural products into these ultra-processed foods, to which they add vitamins and other nutrients synthesized in the lab. So a healthy diet is favored by the food industry. A sustainable diet is favored more by the environment sector. Now, today's theme of science for evidence-based policies, programs, and interventions, a lot of research is being conducted, including research on sustainable diets. It involves characterizing an ecosystem for its ability to provide all the nutrient and energy requirements of a population. And here we can take the example of the Mediterranean diet as a model for sustainable diets. The way in which the Mediterranean diet was characterized, looking at local food biodiversity, traditional dietary patterns, in other words, what was eaten. And over time, it involved food composition work, not only what was eaten, but what was in what was eaten, the nutrients, the bioactive nutrients, anti-nutrients and contaminants and additives. This is all part of food composition work. And aligning this with morbidity and mortality statistics. And this is how the Mediterranean diet has become known as a healthy diet, but also a sustainable diet. Now, a diet or any kind of diet, healthy or otherwise, cannot be assessed without food composition data as the basic information required, the basic scientific information, the evidence that you need to say this diet is healthy or this ecosystem is able to provide for the population all the requirements for the known nutrients. And FAO has traditionally, well, in fact, still does have responsibility for the InFood Secretariat, InFood's the International Network of Food Data Systems, and yet this is not being adequately supported. It's one of the most important sets of data that an organization like FAO can have, particularly as nutrition is a priority and food systems is a focus of scientific attention. And then in addition, work on traditional food systems of indigenous peoples or indigenous food systems. This is another area that is fundamentally important to the whole area of sustainable diets, not just looking forward in time, but looking backwards. Why was the Mediterranean basin considered a healthy environment? What is it about the ecosystem that led to that assessment? So these are other kind of underpinning areas that FAO was working on: traditional food systems of indigenous peoples or indigenous food systems, and organic agriculture and other forms of agroecology are also fundamental in informing these coherent policies and programs on diet and food systems. So in the session in Palermo, we presented, well, one of the reasons for this session was the preparation of a book called Sustainable Diets Linking Nutrition and Food Systems. It was published by CABI, and it was issued early this year. And it was an affiliated project of the One Planet Sustainable Food Systems Program. It had 29 chapters and nearly 100 international experts informing readers with arguments, challenges, perspectives, policies, actions, and solutions on the global topics that have to be understood in order for nutrition to be properly addressed. And the important sectors, the transdisciplinary approach, which was promoted in this activity, was to take agriculture, the environment sector, and the health sector as equally responsible for healthy, sustainable diets and sustainable food systems.
Thanks, Barbara. Before to give the floor to the facilitator, Artur, would like really to remember that in this approach on the Mediterranean, we considered that the fishery was a fundamental component of the food system, while a lot attention in the process also of the One Planet was given to agriculture. And that's why I take this opportunity by having with us Mathiesen, that maybe if you would like really to recast why we cannot really, by thinking in terms of the Mediterranean, as well as, let's say, of the Mediterranean diet, when in the beginning Palermo was supposed to have this keynote introduction, by using the challenges of the Mediterranean diet and the fishery as a case, for sustainability, for food security, and for food safety. We said many, many things. And to this point, by thinking a platform, this platform cannot deal with this huge complex of challenges that is the Mediterranean without thinking that the identity of the Mediterranean, it is related by all these different culture, different food system are surrounded a sea, where fishery is a fundamental to be understood as an integral component of the food system, not just agriculture. Then it will be forest as well. No? I don't know if, Arne, do you think that you can give your contribution?
Yes, thank you, Sandro. If I just, in a very short and very few words, try to sketch out the way I see this. I see the food system as a subsystem or a cornerstone system of the human system in its entirety. And if we don't get the workings of the food systems right, then the human system will, I would say, obviously collapse. I think we agree that the present system is faulty and that it needs to be improved. Maybe too much to say it faces imminent failure, but certainly in the long term, we need to improve it and we need to transform it. And we need to make it healthy. That is a prerequisite of all of it. And we need to make it sustainable. Some might argue that being healthy is an integral part of being sustainable. But saying that, I don't believe that is obvious to everybody. It's worthwhile talking about it both as a healthy and a sustainable food system. This is a kind of a proposal or a theory, and as with any theory or a proposal, it needs to be proven, and we need to do that based on science. And referring back to the Sustainable Fisheries Symposium that took place here last week, the basis of the narrative there, or possibly, hopefully, the new narrative we are trying to forge out there, is that it has to be evidence-based. So it is extremely important for how we move forward with our healthy and sustainable food systems that we have the scientific basis to support them. We have all experienced that there are challenges to this theory and proposal of ours. And there are not everybody that agree, possibly because people have different interests. And there are commercial interests in the present food system. And there are also commercial interests in how the future food system develops. Certainly, as the discussion has been going recently, fish has been highlighted, both coming from captive fisheries, but also coming from aquaculture. And there's certainly a case that can be made for a positive role for both fish from captive fisheries and fish from aquaculture in a healthy and sustainable food system. But that case needs to be made based on science. And if you're going to advance with this theory or this proposal, then we need to support science. Since you mentioned, Sandro, fish specifically, and fish are obviously dear to my heart, I think it's probably wiser in the discussion to talk about variety or diversity, and that in the context of a healthy and sustainable food system, we talk about diversity and what is available locally, and use that as sort of parameters that need to be looked at when you judge what is a system that is likely to be successful. And I think if we move sort of down this path, we may eventually, and maybe not within a very long period, have a very sound scientific basis for healthy and sustainable food systems.
Thanks, Arni. I would like to acknowledge the presence of here at the FAO headquarters, behind Barbara Burlingame, Arni Mathiesen, and Jim Morrison, of Kakoli, Ghosh, Florence, Egal, Alexandre. UN Habitat, Alexandre, Meybeck, and Joseph Valls. While connected with us, Parvitz, I know Parvitz Kaufman, Denis Lairon, from Chania, CIHEAM-Chania to colleagues. Then the CIHEAM-Bari, there is also Lina Bitar, and then we have Milena Stefanova, that is Enea, also as a MAC member of the One Planet. Artur, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Sandro. Thank you very much, colleagues, for your interesting introduction and keynote speeches. We have a very tough topic today, and just following up on the discussion or on your introductory address, I would like just to perhaps to ask the first question, while I would kindly encourage our participants to think about more questions to be introduced for the discussion. And this question I would like to address to Jamie Morrison and other colleagues, of course, are so that we could understand the following. The transformation of food system is expected to trigger various changes at policy level, at production practices and consumption behaviors and patterns. But how, in your view, to ensure that a robust and sustained institutional structures to support the process of transformation are in place, and how they could well coordinated in the Mediterranean context? Thank you.
Sorry, I think I was muted, so let me start again. No, I was just saying thank you for that very difficult question. As I was mentioning in the introductory sort of intervention that I gave, countries are really heavily constrained in what they can do by their existing institutional structure when it comes to food systems. We all know that in all countries, decision-making affecting the evolution of food systems is very fragmented. I'll take one example from the UK, for example, where 43 different parts of government are somehow involved or have the mandate for making decisions which have an impact on food systems. And I know from my own experience of working in UK government that the coordination, whilst it might be better than in some other countries, is certainly not ideal. And we've seen this also with the ongoing discussions in the UK about the development of a new food system strategy. It's very easy to come up with a range of different indicators of suboptimal performance of food systems and to identify what people think are as priorities in terms of what needs to be fixed. But it's very difficult to get any sort of agreement on what an overall holistic strategy may look like. So I think, certainly from the perspective of the work that we've been doing on food systems over the past years, developing the capacities of government in particular, but also through their relationship with other food system stakeholders, to understand the interconnections between the different parts of the food system is a critical first step. Because before you get that understanding, there's no motivation or incentive for any real institutional change within government. And I think if we don't get that institutional change, we can talk all we like about food system transformation, but I'm not sure that we're really going to see transformation taking place on the scale that would be needed to help us to meet the 2030 agenda. We're already seeing that in a report which came out yesterday, I think, about how far behind we are in relation to carbon emissions. And obviously food systems have a major part to play in carbon emissions globally. I think only 3 or 4 of the 20 top polluting countries have even set a target of sort of net zero carbon by a certain point in time. So if we can't even sort out one dimension of sort of the sustainability dimension of the food system, how are we really going to move on a sort of holistic front? So I think, the institutional structures, I'm not sure if we can come up with a blueprint. That probably doesn't make any sense. But certainly working to strengthen that understanding, to start to develop the linkages between different sectors will be a first step in doing that. But I think we've got a significant challenge in doing it. And again, coming back to the science, I think this is what really underpins that development of an improved understanding and improved capacity, that we need to ensure that the science that we're using to inform these processes is robust. Because there's a lot of, as we've heard already, there's a lot of, Barbara was making the point, I think, a lot of discussion, a lot of use of evidence in a fairly partial and often biased way, and we don't really have a way of validating that at the moment.
We'll have Aida Turrini also from CREA joining us. Sorry that I didn't mention before.
Yeah. Let's not make the institutions a point of departure in this discussion. If we have a sound theory that we can support with evidence, then we may need to look at the institutions, whether the present ones are most appropriate to introduce the change and implement the change. But I think we should work on the theory and the evidence of the substantive proposals that we think we could make.
Which I think is sort of along the, what I say, we need to make the case first before making an institutional change.
Yes,
or to promote the institution.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. I can see, yes, please.
Yes, Florence, Egal. Following what we've just been discussing, I'd just like to refer to 2 or 3 things. Years ago, the IPES Foods panel of experts on sustainable food systems came up with a document called the 10 Principles to guide the transition towards sustainable food systems. I think the panel in their discussions agreed that we needed a complementary kind of science, not necessarily only the kind of scientific methods we've been using. I was in a meeting, so was Jamie, Thursday and Friday, where one of the conclusions, one of the things that came up in that meeting was that where we have more experience of systems, practical system thinking now, is in local policies for sustainable food systems. And the challenge that was mentioned before, I think the idea of saying, well, we'll have first science and then we'll have policy makes no sense. We need to have scientists and policymakers learning together on what is actually happening and developing a joint action learning process, because we do need evidence, but we probably need to have much more practice-based evidence, because some things are happening out there that make sense, can be analyzed, and maybe some of the principles emerging on these promising practices could be adapted in other circumstances like climate change. And I think when we're talking fisheries, maybe in some of the integrated coastal area management work, etc., there may be things to learn there where we see what is the fisheries component in this and how do all these things link together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Florence, for your answer and for your comment. I would ask another question, perhaps, and I truly encourage our participants to send questions via chat or just raise the hands, and please be encouraged to do so. Indicators, and one of the, Jamie, you mentioned one of the key dimensions of work is developing tools that will help assess the sustainability of food system and indicators to be created. Can you please suggest or describe what is the timeline for this particular component to be? It's an ongoing process, obviously, but do we have any commonly agreed, or in the nearest future, will we have a commonly agreed set of indicators and tools?
Kakoli, do you want to?
Oh, yeah, thank you very much, Denis. That's the one I wanted to take up. Thank you. Thank you also for that question. I wanted to just start by in response to the question you had just asked before about institutional reforms. I think the whole area of sustainable food systems, the way it is being approached, the way it has been increasingly gained credence around the world is very interesting. And you have to look at the various players, where they are coming from and why they are doing it, because somehow, including the greenhouse gas emission data that came out yesterday, that none of them are going to have met the standards. In fact, GHG has increased in the last 2 years rather than decreased. This all kind of is pointing out to somehow a perfect storm brewing in the whole food, energy, natural resource management sector, where people are recognizing that just science or just policy is not going to be enough, and certainly not in a siloed manner. We have scientific data about practically many of the parameters and indicators which we are thinking of, but we do not have any action supporting those parameters or actions. So of course we must generate more scientific data, and much more is being generated because of the vast increase in scientific capabilities, whether it is GIS monitoring or ground level fact. But what I wanted to point out is what Arnie mentioned, looking at the diversity at the local level. Perhaps when we are talking of food system indicators, we have to not scale up, we have to scale down to look at what kind of data is missing at that level, what kind of indicators are shaping the system at a local level. And what would that be? Is it food insecurity? Is it local unemployment? Is it natural resource unsustainability? There are plenty of these very dissected global data, local data and indicators. But when we are looking at indicators and tools, maybe I think we are lacking some of these locally robust tools which can be deployed to look at what kind of food systems are we talking about at that level for measurement purposes. I'm sure they exist. Barbara mentioned indigenous communities and indigenous tools. Well, I don't know any of those indicators and tools and how to measure it. They might be very good for a certain group, but at my on the ground field level, it's impossible for a practical a smallholder farmer or a businessman or a value chain owner to understand what are the indicator parameters which allows that player in the bigger picture to understand where he or she should make the shift. And this kind of links to our continuous discussions of how to engage local communities, local participants in recognizing the value of their system. This is something FAO has not done very much in the past because we never had that scope. But increasingly, with any number of, what shall I say, local players, not just NGOs, even local participants, industry, coalitions, alliances coming up, maybe we must think of some good examples where we can look at some of these local indicators, including Mediterranean system, perhaps because we have started here with some Mediterranean system. I think we don't know enough about the local systems across the Mediterranean region. We know very much about Italy, maybe a bit about Spain, and a little bit of Morocco, but not in that granularity that will define the system and its indicators. It is possible the indicators may be common, most of it, but not all. And certain diversity is healthy because then we get the natural resource fluctuation, the production level alignment or non-alignment, agroecological issues, the value chain management and mismanagement with regards to developing some kind of an integrated approach. I don't know if I got anywhere near, but the more I think of it, the more I think we need something around not scaling up, but scaling down to what we are talking about.
Right, thank you very much. And to this, we have more questions, and discussion has been going on, and our participants have raised suggestions and questions. Milena, could you please, I can't see you now, but could you please, I see that you have a question in this regard. Could you please raise it?
Hello to everybody. I was listening with big attention what was discussed, and I would like to ask this question. The last speaker was speaking about local level indicators and their relevance for understanding how to move. And there was a previous speaker, unfortunately I couldn't see who it was and also the name, that was speaking about the need for developing a sound theory for the institutional change case. And my question is, how can we link these local level indicators and accommodate them into this into the development of such sound theory that later can be supported by new kind of evidence?
Thank you, Milena. Dear panelists, do you have your suggestions to the question, please?
Well, it's a very big question. But I think the key is partly locally, but it cannot entirely be locally, because you cannot you will not find the general support for the change in the theory in a local situation. You have to, it has to be more general. But there are certainly some major principles that are in common between the various local systems. So you can try to pull them out and pull them together and then fashion the evidence for the theory through them. And I totally agree with Florence that we need to have more information or more knowledge than just sort of traditional science, as we call it. Local knowledge and indigenous knowledge is I think also very valuable, but however has to be subject to the requirement of being evidence-based as well as sort of the traditional science.
Yes, Sandro, please.
I don't know if it fit about the need to better understand what we are trying to do in this context specific for the Mediterranean. This platform is supposed to develop through a common understanding, a conceptual framework, context specific. Why we arrive to say context specific, and many others, they arrive at the same time, because we felt that it was impossible to assess the sustainability on the global scale. So we started to reduce, the size. And we felt that one of the challenges was to identify the Mediterranean as a region. Many organizations, including FAO, they don't have a Mediterranean as one unit. It's a split between Budapest, Cairo, and many other organizations, international committee, they have the same problem, that they are not a common approach to identify a region, a country, a territorial, a site approach. So if we don't start to connect the local that we are talking, the indigenous that we are talking are in the Mediterranean. But these indigenous, they are supposed to be the southern, where there is no data. There are not too many data on the south country, on the site, on the territory. Behind there's some other, like I watch Alexandre Meybeck, that as the French, they work a lot in some place where they speak also French language. But definitely the problem is to have, in this moment, a regional identification, a common vision between three organizations that don't have the same agenda on the Mediterranean. Then to go on the country, then to go in the territorial, then to go to the site. To that point, the experience that we are talking, like we said, to bring on the ground the knowledge, can have a kind of exchange, but we have to bring both the shore of the Mediterranean with a grade of development very, very different that we have in the Mediterranean. And that is something that I don't know.
Yes, sure. Alexandre.
Yeah, just to react to what Sandro has just said. I totally agree. One of the key questions here is precisely to identify these elements that are common to the Mediterranean region and the challenges and opportunities and specificities of the region. And it's true that if you try to delineate the Mediterranean from an institutional point of view, it is now difficult. It was not at a certain moment when globally it was Mare Nostrum and to a great extent the Roman Empire. And it wouldn't be, I think it wouldn't be that difficult to identify challenges that are common to all the Mediterranean regions of the countries that are bordering the Mediterranean. Because probably one of the biggest differences between the north and the south of the Mediterranean is more the interland than the part which is really Mediterranean, which makes a big difference. Water scarcity, erosion, impact of climate change. A very good report from the Union for the Mediterranean has just shown how important it is in the area. Very quick development transformations, rural transformation. There are plenty of issues which are very common in the area. There are also opportunities and changes that are kind of common. And there are also very clear national and regional specificities, which are probably as interesting as the common points because they can help distinguish some drivers of preservation of good things or of change towards something else. And I in that regard, and speaking about evidence, I just want to insist on what is almost a missing link in the way everybody has talked about the issue right now. Everybody always mentioned agriculture, everybody always mentioned nutrition and consumption, but in the middle, you have all the value chain, the transformation and the businesses and the way it works and rural-urban relations. And this is, first, one of the big specificities of the Mediterranean as you compare it to other areas of the world, probably, including the fact that you have the sea in the middle making all the links. And also because these are probably the dimensions on which we know less and which drive a lot of change. I mean, cultural dimensions, sociological dimensions, the fact that women work or don't work and things like that, social and microeconomic evidence, because all over the world, economics there has been a huge emphasis on macroeconomic data. There is less material, and as Vincent said, especially in the countries of the South, on macroeconomic data, but this is what is driving a lot of changes. And globally, one of the big differences that needs to be properly evidenced is the question of the place of food in the whole human system, which is still very important in the Mediterranean, and the value of food. And so, these are not the disciplines to which we are the most accustomed in FAO and in many of our disciplines, these sociological, cultural, and anthropological dimensions, or the details of the value chains, but this plays a very important role that has been also emphasized by the importance of food environment. And I think these dimensions and the importance of actors and of their own agency, for me, is one of the things that was the newest in the Palermo Symposium, with the engagement of local authorities, of the municipality of Palermo, of the Sicily region, of various value chains and tourism interested entities. And because of the links with jobs, with small enterprises, with entrepreneurship, with values, with how to live together in a city, all of these things. So these are very important dimensions that we tend to lose in our quite bureaucratic, indicator-focused way of seeing the world.
Can I say something also, please?
Yeah, I would like to speak too. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting discussion and comments. What I think it's very important also is, as was mentioned previously, the cultural aspect when it comes to sustainable food system. Often we have been neglecting it in scientific or institutional context, but as you know, UNESCO has the cultural aspects of food, food heritage, or all that is a very, very important aspect. And of course, it is very connected to the locality of the food system. So I think UNESCO has been doing some good job in indicators of some of the cultural aspect of the food. And I think we could eventually collaborate with UNESCO because it is recognized as intangible heritage. So, but also it is linked to the whole history but also ecological context of a food system. So I think that specific element of cultural aspect we should not really neglect, and we certainly could use some of the work which has been done by UNESCO in finding indicators. Thank you.
Can I make a few comments, please?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would like to focus on Mediterranean stuff. That's the topic, I think, of the discussion. Just first to remind that, in fact, we started about more than 20 years ago to make a net at the Mediterranean level to deal with the health aspect of the Mediterranean diet and also the cultural aspect. We had a lot of conference. We got the recognition by UNESCO in 2010, and we published the new Mediterranean diet pyramid in 2011. So this was based on scientific information. So we did a lot of work in this aspect, putting people together to make this kind of consensus and achievement. So thanks to the definition of the sustainable diet discussed and published in 2010 and 12 at FAO level, we moved then to the concept of food system. And so we have a lot of scientific evidence from different places in the world or for global aspects. We have a lot of scientific evidence that we cannot continue like we did in the past. So we have enough data. Of course, we need, as a scientist, I would like to have more data, of course. But I think we have enough data today to work to change the direction. It is asked by the UN with the SDGs. There are a lot of reports, a lot of scenarios published. So we have everything we need to go forward. So what we miss and we need now for the Mediterranean diet and the Mediterranean food system is to have a platform where we can work together, we can share data, we can share discussion, concept, and so on. So we have already published a list of indicators for the sustainability of Mediterranean diet. We identified more than 70 indicators, you know, in different blocks. So, but we need to share that. We need to put everything together. We need to have a recognized platform at the international level to be able to work together. Not only nutritionists, not only agronomists, not only ecologists or people dealing with culture. We need to put everything together, but we need a platform. We already tried at European level to have a cost action, but we did not succeed to get a support. But now it is really time to have a platform, and I think that One Planet worldwide network is a very, very good opportunity to have this platform as a core initiative of this sustainable food system network from the UN. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And I think this is really a great platform for the common goal. Specific actions have yet to be developed, but please, dear participants, feel free to comment what Denis was saying. I think it's an interesting and encouraging comment.
Can I say something?
Yes, sure, please.
Thank you.
Who is speaking now? We can't see you.
Sorry, I have not the webcam. Anyway, okay. I would like to. I've heard a lot of very interesting things, and I think that, as was saying before, is a lot of knowledge is already gained. Every participant has already mentioned this, stressed this aspect. I was thinking to propose a sort of approach to use having a platform to perform these tasks. Is it possible to arrive to a sort of white paper, or I don't know if the terms is correct, correct me please, but I would like to propose to listing these arguments and then to decide, following a multi-criteria approach, to prioritize it, all, especially in the perspective of an action implementation, institutional action, and not only institutional, but also the voluntary guidance that was mentioning Sandro last web dialogue, and to take each arguments that are prioritized and submitting to the strength and weakness, opportunity and threats analysis, the SWOT analysis, and the STEEP analysis, that is social, technological, economical view. And then after this thorough excursion, to have an integrated, again, analysis that can be fixed later. I have not a precise idea now. So I would like to propose that all these arguments that are have been already mentioned, and mostly in many cases, not in many cases, sorry, the background is also very solid, scientifically sound arguments. So if you agree, we can start with this practical implementation using a platform where sharing the discussion. I don't know if it's clear, but anyway, in case I can try to elaborate a little bit more this proposal, if feasible. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that Aida Turrini was speaking, and Sandro, I guess you may want to reflect on this proposal.
Okay, that is a very sensitive issue, but I think that is arrived the time. Within the One Planet platform in 2017, as a joint collaboration between CIEAM and FAO, we drafted, it was published, the voluntary guideline toward the sustainability of the Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean region. It was at that occasion launched again a proposal to establish this platform that we are in 2019. This process that was launched in 2017 was proposed in the first meeting of the One Planet, the Sustainable Food System in Paris in 2016. We still have pending, and I hope that this is opportunity of reinforce the collaboration between CIEAM and FAO, with the input also of the Union for the Mediterranean, to insert in the output of this common ground discussion paper that is preparatory towards to a white paper, to restart to work together with FAO and to finalize it with all the stakeholders that were there. They came, most of them, they came in Palermo, to start to take it from where we left this voluntary guideline to improve the sustainability of the Mediterranean diet in the Mediterranean region in the context of the sustainable food system. And I think that thanks to Aida, that you refreshed this need that I think that has to be brought to the discussion, to the further step of the process toward the co-development of this platform. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sandro. Would anyone else would like to reflect on that?
Well, if we now speak full floor.
Go ahead.
Well, I would like, but I'm not going to talk of the platform. Can I still come up with my comment?
Sure, absolutely, yes, of course.
Okay, thank you very much. 2 points. I think I would like that we make a difference between countries and and environment concerns, because I think France is not a Mediterranean country, nor is Italy. And I think we need to acknowledge that, but I agree that around the Mediterranean, we have a Mediterranean bioregion. And I think it's very important that we start teaming with environmentalists much stronger. I've been very impressed by the bioregional maps that Natura 2000 has come up with, which I think would give us a good basis for territorial approaches. Because we work at local, but local is not only subnational. Often those bioregions go across borders that have been put there for political and historical reason, has nothing to do with sustainability. So if we're talking food systems, we need to have a broader perspective on how the food is obtained, managed, etc. And that is not within a given country. It has to be thought about in a more comprehensive way. I said I was talking on behalf of UN Habitat. Following the Quito Habitat 3 conference, UN Habitat adopted the new urban agenda, and part of it was working on rural-urban linkages. A whole program was set up, and there's guiding principles on urban-rural linkages that have been issued. And I'm just back from China, where there was the first conference on rural-urban linkages. The Mediterranean is a highly urbanized area. Before there were countries there, where there were city-states. And I think that if we start looking at the cities on the shores of the Mediterranean and how they feed themselves, have fed themselves, and how this should be reoriented for a more healthy diet that would go back to more of the Mediterranean diet models, I think we would have a good starting point. And so one of the things I would like also to share on behalf of my UN Habitat colleagues in Nairobi headquarters, they are very interested in what is going on here, and they have a regional office in Cairo, and I would be happy to share with you the email address of the program officer. I think that there we can maybe give a hand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please.
If I may, I think this is a very interesting point from Florence, and reminds me of the comments that the mayor of Palermo made at the meeting last spring, when he was contrasting Palermo to Frankfurt for instance. Yes, and I haven't seen the bioregion that she referred to from nature, but I totally agree that political boundaries are often a coincidence, and possibly in addition to the bioregional boundaries, we should look at cultural boundaries. Sometimes they coincide and sometimes they don't. But going back to the platform and to the scientific evidence, which I think is linked, we need to decide what substantive components are going to be on the platform, or what the substantive components that the platform needs to be built from. These components, they need to reflect the policies that we see needed to implement the transformation that Jamie mentioned in the beginning. But these policies, they need to be evidence-based, and it needs to be shown that they have something to do with the transformation that we want to achieve. Every policy needs to have a goal, and the goal also needs to be evidence-based. Until we have the goals, we don't really have an opportunity to decide what are the indicators. They then come off as naturally when we have the goals, and then in between we have the activities, which again link to the components of the platform. And I think thinking about this in this way, which is in no way is revolutionary, could sort of help us move towards creating the platform.
Yes, please. I can see our Denis hand.
Yeah.
Shall I go? Or?
Yeah. You too. You.
Yes. Yes. Let's continue. Who is? Okay. Yes, please.
Yeah. So just to say that, of course, just to comment the last speaker, I think we have no time now to wait for anything. We are in an urgency situation. The next deadline is 2030. So what we do? So we can wait. We can wait for new data. We can wait for everything and do not change anything. Or we do what we have to do now for the next generation. So that means we need to change our directions. This was made with a definition of sustainable diets 10 years ago. What do we do with that? We have now the UN One Planet Sustainable Food System program. Do we extend it and work on the Mediterranean area or not? We cannot wait. Otherwise, it will be too late. All the figure, we know all the figure. We have all the report from the IPCC and other reports regarding the oceans, regarding everything. We have information. What we need to have now is to take responsibility to change and to be leaders in that change. Otherwise, we will not assume our responsibility regarding the people from everywhere, and especially the Mediterranean area. We cannot continue to speak as we spoke during decades. You know, now we need to change and we need to take action. It is very, very urgent. Everybody knows that.
Denis, thank you very much. Action is needed indeed. Everybody knows in what kind of problematic or even terrible, I would say, situation our environment and related areas are. So, this is what I believe we are trying also to facilitate through the establishment of this platform as a practical instrument in order to communicate specific needs and generate actions and projects which are needed urgently, or scale them up while speaking about those projects which are already ongoing. And there are quite a few examples in the Mediterranean region. But let's continue our discussion with José. I think you were raising your hands, if I saw it right.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. It was coming back also to the platform, and we need action. We have information, but also is the information compiled in a way that is possible to use it for action? And from the discussion also, one of the first tasks that appeared for this for the platform seemed to be this identification of what different food systems exist already in the Mediterranean, and what are common elements of these food systems, no? What are common challenges, but also common parameters for measuring the efficiency or the effectiveness of these systems. So I assume that would be a first, one of the first tasks of this platform. And the question is whether this is a task that is starting almost from scratch, or are there already, of course there is a lot of information already out there, but has there been already an effort of compiling or trying to compile this information with this approach, with this perspective of looking at the different food systems in the Mediterranean, like for example from the CIHEAM in Bari or in Chania or others, or are we starting that compilation of the identification of the common elements from scratch?
Yes, Sandro, please.
Yes, it was a proposition to do this mapping through the Task Force 2 and the Task Force 4 of the One Planet Sustainable Food System with the Divine and the Marina Bertoletti. And then CIHEAM offered also to work on that when we were in Palermo. But we didn't proceed waiting that will be reached, and we hope soon after 4 years, an agreement between the three organizations to agree to move together, because this is still be an initiation phase. So we have to identify the wording like governance, commitment, responsibility, the division of the task, who has to do. In the meantime, we are part of the One Planet, but we wanted to build a platform. And the first one of the activity, but how we can identify the activities while we don't know if there is any agreement to move further. And I hope that, as we know, the platform has identified from September to December this initiation phase that has to be closed. Then has to be decided if the three organizations, they want to go together, at which level, no? Which activity each one is going to carry. They will be led by the three, will be led by one, it will be led by two or the three. And that we are really working this transparent participatory process. And because the time also is a little bit late, that it was not easy to do these web dialogue programs in order to share with everybody this kind of process that maybe for many was like to losing time, but we felt that we had also to get, after the Palermo, all these outcomes in order to move in action. For the moment, we cannot move on action because we don't know under which umbrella we are moving.
Thank you very much, Sandro, for your clarification. I think Jose's question is still there. Jose, you were asking actually our colleagues from CIHEAM, and I think we have CIHEAM-Chania with us, or in terms of whether or not there is any ongoing work on the question.
Well, first I would like to thank everybody for their contribution. This subject that you are discussing is the subject of my thesis, which is the Mediterranean diet as a sustainable diet, and if we can have it as a consumption, I like to bring it back as a consumption pattern in the Mediterranean region. I agree with what has been said about studying the effectiveness of the Mediterranean diet as a food system, and that's exactly what I plan to do. We are going to study the environmental impact of the Mediterranean diet to prove that it's environmentally friendly, and then we are trying to come up with different policies and actions to be taken into account in order to improve the current consumption in the Mediterranean region.
Well, thank you very much for explaining what's going to happen. I guess Jose, the work is of course ongoing, but we have to respect now the time again. We have to close the dialogue. We have it's already 2:30. So, any final notes from our panelists today before we close? Sandro, I think since you are in the room, in the file room, you could kindly take over for the no. Do I understand correctly?
Please close you.
Okay. So I believe it was a very fruitful discussion. Good points were raised. Indeed, we need to come up with, I guess, specific methodology which will be more or less common for the region, for sub-regions. At the same time, there is an urgent need to act on those challenges, on various challenges and drivers, and I can't agree less with Denis in this regard. So, dear participants, thank you very much. We will continue our discussion perhaps online, not online, but if you have any contributions from your part, kindly be encouraged to send those to myself and to Sandro in the first place, so we could include your ideas in the upcoming paper. Thank you very much for your participation, for your time, for your ideas, sharing with us. I wish all of us a very productive ending of the process, and hopefully the platform will fly and will deliver what it's expected to deliver, contributing to sustainability of the food system in the Mediterranean. Thank you very much again. All the best from our side.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.